Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. The fracking debate continues to rage in South Africa. Engineering News editor Terence Creamer joins me today to discuss some of the major themes. Terence, welcome to Second Take. There was a public debate this week on what is the hottest topic since load shedding. What was said?
Yes, the debate was held in Midrand under the aegis of the Johannesburg Press Club, and we had participants talking on either side of a motion of whether the moratorium on the issuing of licenses for exploration in the Karoo is appropriate, which is what the government in South Africa has decided, what action they've decided to take, given that fracking is a fairly new industry, not necessarily in the world, but for South Africa. And those that attended would have been probably surprised that actually most in the audience voted in favour of moving ahead with some form of interrogation of fracking or lifting the moratorium, which is not the sort of common view of fracking in South Africa. There seems to have been quite a strong anti-fracking lobby that's emerged over the last few months, and that has taken up most of the newsprint pages as well as the airwaves. But this was quite a level-headed debate, and it was quite academic heavy. And the academics participating, especially the geologists, they raised serious risks that we don't know, or imponderables that we don't really know about this industry yet. And he felt that the policy shouldn't really get ahead of that scientific baseline, and he felt that we needed to go through a whole process of research and study, taking into account what's happening internationally, but also very specific conditions in the Karoo, including potential earthquake hazards in that region. He noted that the most recent earthquake was actually on the 14th of May, so it's not like it happened many, many years ago. That is an earthquake zone, and as he said, poking holes into the Karoo might have some, these would be very deep holes, might have some hazards. He described it as sort of poking a sleeping lion with a stick, saying that you do that at your peril. But the debate was, I think when it was looked at purely through an energy prism, which one speaker did, to take that approach, an economic and energy prism. The sort of case for fracking is pretty strong in South Africa. The first factor is that we are fossil fuel intensive. This is a fossil fuel, but we are very coal intensive. So he looked at the rest of the world being sort of 70% coal based on average. We're 90% coal based with both our electricity and our petrol coming from coal. And he was saying, we need to change that equation. This is an opportunity to change that equation, in that if we find natural gas, and he says Shell and others should be allowed to start exploring for that gas in the Karoo, it could unlock a whole new, fossil fuel-based resource, but a much lower carbon fossil fuel-based resource, which he says could be used to stimulate a lot of new economic activity, from steel making through to new fuels for taxis, through to a whole range of new activities related to power supply using that gas. So he felt thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs could be derived from exploiting this opportunity. But there was also a view that we can't just look at this through an energy prism, and we need to start taking account of what one of the participants described as a super nexus emerging between water, energy, food security, and global climate change, and try and understand the risks of fracking within that context, and that the precautionary principle should apply, whereby South Africa does create that scientific baseline, that scientific understanding before any movement is made on actually drilling the Karoo. On the other hand, the participants were saying that it's going to be difficult to prove a negative, and actually, how can fracking prove itself as environmentally safe as well as economically viable, unless we can go ahead with some form of exploration and development.
What has South Africa's response been so far, and how does it compare with approaches taken elsewhere in the world?
Yeah, South Africa's approach has been one of caution. So the government has instituted a moratorium on the issuance of exploration licenses in the Karoo region, where a fairly sizable unconventional gas resource is expected to exist. Now, this is fairly significant in world terms. In fact, one of the speakers at the debate mentioned that this could be the 5th largest unconventional gas resource in the world. So we've got to know that China has huge shale gas reserves, so does the US, so does Argentina and Mexico. South Africa could come in 5th ahead of Australia and Canada. So you can see why there's interest in South Africa from large multinational companies and in drilling in this region, because this region has been explored in the past by the old state-owned oil company called Sucor, and that there is evidence to suggest that this shale gas exists. And you know, over the last, well, some would say 40 years, others would say a more recent phenomenon is that hydraulic fracturing, which is really using a combination of water, lots of water, some fluids, fracking fluids, chemicals, and sand, sort of under pressure into these deep aquifers to break the rock and release the shale gas that then can be harvested. And some people say, look, this has been around for 50 years and there's no real risk. And if you actually do explore the risks, in the economies that have really pursued this, like the US and Canada, they sort of look manageable. Others have said, no, that actually this fracking on this scale and hasn't really happened until fairly recently. So the scientific baseline is not really well established. So there's an international debate around fracking. The UK Parliament this week, the lawmakers there a committee there felt that there should be no impediments put to further exploration of shale gas in the UK, because the science didn't really raise any alarm bells. Whereas the French Senate, on the other hand, has put a moratorium in place. And then just yesterday we saw that the big oil companies in the US, Exxon and Chevron, had shareholder meetings. And this was a major topic for debate at those shareholder meetings, with shareholder activists saying we need more transparency around your protocols around fracking. And the US, under President Barack Obama, has said part of their energy security plan is to exploit these unconventional sources in a more aggressive way. They have a plan to reduce their dependence on foreign oil. And they see this new unconventional resource as part of the solution to that. So they want to go ahead, but a lot of alarm bells are being raised, not only by environmental activists, but also by shareholder activists and ordinary shareholders who see this as a potential risk, a hazard that might become a legal complaint and might lead to a dent in shareholder earnings. But like, Deepwater Horizon last year, we saw what a deep water, which is also, I suppose, an unconventional. It's not on land, it's very deep. They use similar, having to drill very deep into the ground. Can those safeguards be breached and lead to a big disaster? And then huge payment and costs to everyone, not just environmental, but to shareholders.
How do you see this issue being dealt with in future?
Well, I think South Africa is going to have to engage in this debate. I think this blanket moratorium, no one really supports this blanket moratorium on fracking. I think we need to engage with this technology, understand that there are going to have to be trade-offs made in South Africa. Yes, we have a water-scarce country. Yes, Karoo in particular is arid, and we're going to have to look at how we manage that water contamination threat. But there's an energy crisis in South Africa and a jobs crisis in South Africa. Does hydraulic fracturing have a role to play, maybe in dealing with our tight energy equation at the moment and diversifying our base away from coal, because it can provide a fuel for fairly reliable energy, baseload energy, or are the risks too high? And also the issue of the socio-economic benefits. Are those advocates saying that many thousands of jobs can be created if we do exploit the gas of the Karoo? Are they correct? And we need to do some sort of cost-benefit analysis. In fact, one of the participants, Dr. Anthony Turton, who's well known for the water in the water sphere, was saying what really is needed. So even though he was pro the current moratorium, what is needed during this phase is some sort of negotiation, a social compact involving water practitioners and policymakers, energy policymakers and practitioners, and also agriculturalists, and to come together, and those who are concerned about the climate change threat, to come together and to look at a number of these issues and solutions, and to try and form some sort of negotiated settlement about moving forward in a much more transparent way with very strong regulation in place, which I think there is a view that maybe in the US, the cart has been put before the horse, where the regulation is now going to come, and they've gone ahead a bit like cowboys and drilled and drilled and drilled. And in fact, they're drilling into a resource that is really what some geologists would say is a fairly marginal sort of the dregs, and is almost an indicator of peak oil, because we're having to go to these sort of lengths to extract fossil fuel. So I think that's probably where South Africa will go. That's our brand. We go for negotiated settlements. We go for social compacts. I don't think we will a long-term moratorium is sustainable.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.